Hi, and welcome to this video, where I want to show you how we can use application integration and Apigee, which are two Google Cloud services, to turn an SFTP server that is hosting big XML zip files into fast and lean JSON APIs using Apigee. So let's dive right in. Our problem statement is like this. So how can we offer like a big zip of XML files on an FTP server as a modern REST API? So what are our options here? First, I want to walk you through the actual solution and show a demo of how it works, and then we'll go into the architecture and the details and how it was configured and set up. So let's take a look at the demo. So to start off with, we're here in my desktop environment, and I'm connected to my FTP server here where we have one new file that's been uploaded. Theoretically, we're getting new files pushed here all the time, right? So with daily updates of different data that is being pushed to be synchronized. And so this is my FTP server where data is coming in. Let's switch over to application integration and the integration connectors running in Google Cloud. And here we can configure the connections to various, third-party or external or internal Google systems. And here I have an SFTP connector configured that's active, and then it's connected to my SFTP server. And we can also configure the scaling for this, right? The minimum number of nodes, 50, maximum number of nodes, and exactly how this connector can scale to, get us connected with as much data that flows through that SFTP server. Additionally, I have a cloud storage connector configured, which we're going to use to kind of cache and store the data that we extract from these zip files on the FTP server. So this is the connections that we're using in our integration flows. Here in application integration, we have a flow called SFTP processor. The cool thing about application integration is that we can have mini triggers within a flow, right? So in this case, our main trigger is the schedule trigger, which is going to, for example, run like every evening and check the SFTP server for files, get all of the paths. So it doesn't matter if there's 1 or 100 or however many files there are, and then do a for each parallel processing of those files, right? So it's going to go through the list and then start a subtask or a trigger with each of those files, and it's going to run an async, right? So we're not going to wait for it to complete. And so it can basically scatter, spin up all of those processing flows as needed on demand. So the flow, though, that's going to really do the processing of each zip file that's processed is called process SFTP file. The cool thing is as well is that we could test this just by sending a link or a URL of a file here. So, but we're also going to get it from our for each parallel processing here as well, right? And it just takes the file path, checks to make sure it's a zip file, and then we're going to call a cloud function that is going to download that. That cloud function has as much memory as needed. So even if this is a very large file, we can process it, have any special logic needed, right, to extract the contents, do any, chopping or conversions or stuff that are needed. And if we need logic, then it's great to put it in a cloud function that can have a proper, CI/CD pipeline and tests and all the rest. So we can easily trigger that from directly here in our flow. You can also see we have an authentication profile set up. So this is only accessible with the correct credentials. So our flow is allowed to call this function and, push the data there to be extracted and processed. It's going to return links to all of the files that are extracted from the zip file. And then we're going to do an additional for each parallel conversion of those files, which is going to start this other trigger, which is going to process those XML files and convert them to JSON, right? And basically, we're going to get the inputs, download the file, convert it to JSON, and then write it back to cloud storage in case, in case someone needs it, right? So this is going to run as well in parallel based on that processing. And the only additional trigger we have in this flow is a get JSON file. So if anyone's requesting or needs access to that, converted JSON data, they can call this trigger and we can retrieve it from cloud storage and give it back to the caller. So these are the triggers, and it's really cool that we can manage these very easily from a single pane of glass, basically for all the different steps, and divide up the processing into parallel, jobs and conversions as well, and manage that here in application integration. So let's go over to cloud storage. So this is where we're going to use a bucket to store extracted data and also converted data, and then make it easily available to clients who need it, right? So our integration flow writes the XML data as well as the JSON converted data here to this bucket. And then later we're going to see how an API can easily offer that to clients. So let's go ahead and test this. We can easily test any of these triggers just by testing them here and giving any configuration properties that are needed to send them off. This is just the bucket name, so that's correct. And so let's go ahead and test the integration. This is only going to find that one file, so this won't take too long. And then it's going to pass it off to be processed in the subflows, right? So there's no results here from this processing. It's just going to show that, yes, it's successfully completed. There's no results. And in the background, all of the processing is being executed with these for each parallel conversions. If we switch over to the bucket, we should see extracted data starting to show up here. So our processes are running, and the flows are working and extracting the zip file, and that data is showing up here. So here are all the extracted XML files. They're around 3 megabytes each, and and there's quite a few that are popping up here from our process SFTP file, and then the process, and that's extracting it to cloud storage, and then process XML to JSON will start the conversion soon. So we should start seeing JSON data popping up here as well at some point. So there's the first JSON conversions popping up. So this is all running, scaled out in the background. And now clients can, utilize this converted data or raw data if they want. And we're going to offer that through an API in Apigee. So here's the configuration in Apigee to access that data for clients. I have two versions of the API, the version 1 and the version 2. Version 1 uses the integration flow to access the data, and version 2 just goes directly to the bucket because we're not doing any conversion in real time. That's already been done in the background, which is good. So if clients want to access it, they can basically do that very effectively here just directly through the API. So this is basically the fastest way if we don't need any extra integration logic for this particular operation. So the first thing that we do is that the clients can pass in query parameters for the date and the file that they'd like to access. Then we're going to pass that off to the API. So we're just going to call the storage API directly and fill in that information, date and file, and then just return the contents of that file directly to the client. And it'd be super easy to add additional authentication and quotas and rate limits and all the cool API features that make it possible to get users onboarded and authenticated to consume this API. So that's all stuff we could easily add here as policies. So let's go ahead and test it out. And another great feature in Apigee is debugging. So we can see the requests in real time that come through. So let's start a debugging session. And so we're listening here on the V2 version of SFTP data. And let's go ahead and get a command line and do a call. So we're going to call our API endpoint /v2/SFTP data, and then pass in the date and the file we want to retrieve. And you can see that returns it back super fast. And so because we already converted and got everything prepared in the background and we're just accessing the cloud storage, and here we can also step through and see exactly how the processing is proceeding to get the variables that I passed in, the date and the file, and pass those to our cloud storage and retrieve that information for the user, right? And we can also track all of the response content and codes and see that data flowing back to the users. Cool. So I hope that was interesting to kind of show an end-to-end processing of, from big FTP zip files to, extracting them, converting them, and offering them in a, high performance, cool API for clients. And as you can see, this is super flexible to adapt and change and extend. And if we wanted to send additional triggers or alert systems that, new files are available and new data is available, it'd be so easy just to add additional steps to these flows and, send a pub sub message or a REST call and, let this send signals out that others can access this super cool and data that's ready to be consumed. Great. So now that we've seen the demo, let's go into the implementation details. So the question was, how can we offer a big zip of XML files on an SFTP server as a modern REST API? So the first step is that daily we're getting these uploads of XML zip files to our SFTP server. Integrate application integration is using the connector to check for those files. And then, using the for each parallel loops to go and start the processing of each of those files, right? And basically doing kind of a scatter gather approach and calling the cloud function to help with the extraction and putting those extracted files onto cloud storage. From there, each cloud storage file is being triggered to be processed to JSON data as well through the application integration processing. And those JSON files are also being written to cloud storage, where then in step 6, Apigee APIs can easily be offered to clients so that they can authenticate themselves and get access to the JSON high performance JSON data in real time and use that in their different apps and experiences. And so that's exactly, an easy way to add application integration on top of our various, data servers and SFTP and any other, services or infrastructure that we have out there. And then use Apigee to get the access set up in place, right? And make it easy for clients and apps and, anyone basically who's authorized to consume, much nicer data than all of that raw data that we have lying around in our different backends. So a couple of gotchas and things to watch out for. There are data size and processing limits in application integration. So it's easy and helpful to leverage cloud functions to split and process large files that might need additional memory and processing power. Additionally, in application integration, avoid copying and processing gigantic strings of data because that eats up memory and can hit those limits. So that's why it's a good idea to convert to JSON early if you're going to use JSON anyway in a transformer task and pass off the heavy processing if needed to a cloud function. These flows could further be divided up, so we could also keep track of which files were already processed and which weren't. And so currently, all the files are always being processed, and we're just overwriting the files and the conversions. But we can optimize that, of course, with further checks. The async loops are super useful in application integration, so that all kinds of conversions or copy jobs can all be started in parallel. So we're not waiting for all of them to complete and just blocking the overall processing. And also, as we mentioned in the demo, it'd be super easy to send a pub sub or a REST call at the end of the processing to alert any systems that something's been done or processed or new data is ready for them to pick up. Right. So this can increase the reactivity and the real time nature of these jobs, and really impress people with getting results proactively and in real time. So here's some links and resources, some documentation on the SFTP connector from application integration, as well as a GitHub repo with all of these assets. So you can pretty easily deploy the solution and go through it and adapt it and see, how this could potentially be used in some of your use cases. So thank you very much for your attention. If there's any questions or comments, just reach out and have a great day.